Oh, thank you so much for having me, and thanks everyone for coming. It's amazing to see such a great turnout. Well done, Michael and gang. I'd also like to acknowledge we're on the lands of the Kaurna people and pay my respects to elders past, present and future, and just to remind us that the privilege that we all enjoy living on this land came at great cost to other people, and that sovereignty's never been ceded, and that there's still injustice happening to this day, that us in this party are all about working together with our First Nations and Torres Strait Islanders brothers and sisters to address and remedy. I just want to firstly tell a funny story, because I had a massive screw up on my the election campaign. I'm out in Macon, and so there's not heaps of resource or energy happening in Macon because Tony's made it such an amazingly safe seat over these years. And so I'm out there on the night before election day setting up booths on my own, plastering it with as many banners and call flutes and whatnot as I can. And I went to one place and tried to work out where I thought it all should be set up, and then arrived the next morning as I was the booth captain, and I'd set the whole thing up at the exit. So 6:30 in the morning, suddenly had to rework it all on my own and bring it out to the front, chop it all down. And so clear instructions are helpful as a volunteer. But I want to talk about a couple of things that I've learned through running volunteer organisations and advocacy campaigns through Welcoming Australia and the other things that I've been involved in. And we've heard some of these things touched on before, but hopefully put a little bit of a different spin on it. It's really important, as we've heard, to have that compelling vision and to be able to connect that easily to the many mundane things that you end up doing as a volunteer. But it means understanding the difference between transactional leadership, which is if you do this thing, you'll get this as a reward, and transformational leadership, which is when you say, let's do this together, because together we're creating change for people, for society, for our climate, and for the future. In a movement, transactional leadership looks like, in an either unspoken or spoken way, if you do these things, then you'll make it in this party. And that devalues our cause, it devalues our motives, it elevates selfish motives, and it creates competition instead of solidarity. The problem is that this kind of transactional leadership often actually works as a motivator, especially when people have found identity and belonging in a cause, or in a football club, or in a movement, or in a church, or anyone that relies on volunteers. But what happens then is you get short-term outcomes using that kind of transactional leadership. But it turns off people who are attracted to the values, the vision and the cause, and it erodes the culture of the movement over the long term. Transformational leadership, on the other hand, prioritises healthy culture and achieving long-term outcomes over short-term activity. It doesn't mean that there's not a culture of high commitment or working hard for the cause, it's always got that. But the motivation is different, the solidarity is stronger, and the attractiveness of the movement to people just dipping their toe in or trying it out for the first time is so much greater. Transformational leadership means that you embody the cause that you're inviting people into. In other words, people are turned off when you preach solidarity but practice division. They're turned off when you preach inclusion and equal opportunity, but that's not how they experience being part of the movement or the cause or the club. Secondly, you need to have a clear invitation to commitment. Ella touched on this a little bit, I think Deputy Premier did as well. A bad experience of volunteering is when there aren't clearly defined roles and responsibilities, and you find yourself being held accountable for things that you never knew were actually your responsibility. And so when you're bringing people into a team or a movement or a party or a cause, it's also really important to verbalise the unspoken expectations. The worst experience you have is discovering that you're on the outer, socially or in the gang, because you've transgressed something that is assumed knowledge for everyone else, but no one's ever told you you can't say that or do that or think that. A catchphrase that's really helpful is that the gap between expectations and reality is conflict. It's really helpful in lots of settings. It's why governments get voted out. It's why politicians' approval rating goes down, because the gap between expectations and the gap between expectations and reality is conflict. Be clear what it means to be involved, make plain the unspoken expectations, and communicate about what's really happening, because people can sense when something's happening that they don't understand and haven't been made party to. Volunteers are co-workers and comrades, not machines or minions. You lose people when they feel like they can't make the mark no matter how hard they try, and even more so when they don't know why. That's why clearly defined expectations are so important. Who wants to be committed to people who never really explain why some people are in and some people are out? And there seems to be no consistency behind it. In this movement, we have the most attractive cause to be a part of. We exist so that every person, regardless of gender, race, faith, sexuality, or background, can have equal opportunity to belong, contribute, and thrive in a society that holds no one back and leaves no one behind. And what I've learned in Welcoming Australia and loads of other organising and advocacy campaigns is that movements who keep people connected and keep people volunteering and keep the movement healthy is when their internal practice and culture reflects the values that attracted people to it in the first place. And I think all of us have equal responsibility to create that culture in this movement and in this party. Thank you very much.